It all began simply. At the city gates on a hot afternoon, an orphan poured water from a jug to 3 dusty travelers, gave them bread and salt, and sat them down in the shade of an elm tree. She did this without being asked or bargaining, as if she had an abundance of resources, although everyone knew that she had no home, no relatives, and no money. She said that the water was clean, that the mugs had been scrubbed with sand, and that she had baked the bread at night on a communal hearth. The travelers said nothing, but one of them noticed how she did not spill a drop, how she held the heavy jug with ease, and how she placed it on a stone so that it would not roll away or crack the bottom. He also noticed a small bone pendant hanging from her cord, carved in the shape of an ear of corn with 3 sharp points next to it, like 3 nails, and how she pressed it to her palm for a moment, as if checking that it was still there. Friends, I am glad to welcome you. Please write in the comments where you are watching this video from. I am curious to know who is with us today. I wish you pleasant listening. Her name was Mira. She lived by the gate because there were always people there, and someone would throw her a crust or a coin. The guards knew her, the herb seller knew her, and the old blind musician who came to play in the shadow of the tower knew her. She helped the guards call for help when thieves came to the gate, and she helped the herb seller carry bundles of wormwood when it was too heavy for her. Sometimes Mira would repair broken hooks in the gatehouse because she had enjoyed taking things apart and putting them back together since she was a child. She did this out of curiosity and necessity, without the right to call herself a craftsman. A blacksmith on the outskirts once said that she had precise hands, but he did not take her on as an apprentice because she was a girl without family or recommendations, and it would be a waste of coal and iron. He said that this was the statutory truth, and added that the guild ruled the city, and without the guild, no one was allowed to do anything. That day, 3 travelers drank her water, ate her bread, and then counted their coins, as people accustomed to order do. They all had familiar city symbols engraved on their rings: an ear of corn, scales, and a hammer with 3 nails under it. Myrrh looked away. It seemed to her that the symbol on her pendant resembled the ring of the middle traveler. She whispered to herself that it was just a coincidence, that any knife could make such cuts, and remained calm. The travelers asked the guard who the girl was. The guard replied that she was a local orphan, that her mother had died of illness many years ago, and that no one knew her father. He added that the girl was honest, had never been caught in petty theft, and that her hands were quick and not talkative. Mira heard the guard say that the girl sometimes cut bone buttons and made such smooth holes that the thread passed through without snagging. The guard said this without a smile, as a dry fact. The travelers stayed there for a day. They said that their horses had lost a horseshoe and that they would need a blacksmith. Mira offered to guide them because she knew a short path along the river. They walked in silence along the way. The travelers watched how she walked, where she put her feet, how she kept close, not rushing ahead, but not lagging behind either. At the blacksmith's, they called themselves travelers, without mentioning their positions. The blacksmith recognized them, as was evident from the way he became cautious, blew the dust off the anvil, and told his apprentice not to make any unnecessary noise. At that moment, the travelers noticed how Mira looked at the box of nails, how she scanned them with her eyes, and noticed that some of the nails were poorly made. Their heads were crooked, and because of this, the lids of the chests would sit crookedly. The blacksmith asked her what she was looking at. She said that there would be complaints about such nails, and that it would be better to take them back for reworking. He grunted, but put the nails aside anyway. The travelers exchanged glances. The eldest of them told the blacksmith that complaints about crooked heads had become frequent in the city, and that the guild would cut off supplies to those who did shoddy work. The blacksmith replied that he understood. Mira stood nearby and listened, realizing that their words carried weight, even if they did not name names. In the evening, the travelers returned to the gate. Mira brought them kvass, gave them dried apples, and brought a woolen cloak to one of them, because it was supposed to get cold at night. She said that the cloak was old and colorful, but warm. The travelers thanked her. Before going to sleep, the middle traveler noticed her pendant and asked where it came from. Mira replied that the pendant had belonged to her mother, and that her mother had said that this carving was a sign of the bread-making craft and honest accounting. She said she knew nothing more. The traveler said that she had a good eye and a steady hand, and that he had noticed this. He added that people with such hands should learn how to make plumb lines, measuring spoons and scales, otherwise their gift would fade away. The next day, the travelers entered the city. They told the guard to let Mira in too, because they needed to show her a place where a steady hand was valued. Mira was confused, but she went. The city greeted her with the noise of the market, the smell of fresh bread, and wet leather at the shoemakers' shops. The travelers did not take her to the rich quarters, but to a narrow street where people with poor eyesight and strong fingers worked behind lilac curtains. It was the street of weighers and measurers. Here they kept weights, bowls, plumb lines, measuring boards, seals, and stamps. Here they checked that the measure was fair and the seal on the bag was genuine. They entered a house that smelled of oil, bone, and brass. The older traveler took off his ring, touched it to a metal plate by the door, and the lock opened silently, even though it was just a simple hook with a stop. Mira noticed a board hanging on the wall in the side room with carved guild symbols. Among them, the same ear of corn with 3 lines as on her pendant. She stood still and silent. Her heart was beating faster, but her step was steady. The travelers told the steward that the girl should be given a simple task: to polish the bone buttons so that they would not cut the thread, and to make 4 even holes in each with an awl without pricking her fingers. Mira sat down at the table, took the awl, clamped the button not too tightly, found the center, and made the first puncture. She said to herself that the holes should be on the sides of the button, otherwise it would skew the fabric. She made 10 buttons, then 20, then 25, and not a single thread caught on any of them. The steward said that this girl could be entrusted with more delicate work. She was given a slice of mutton fat to grease the awl and bone, and a crooked wooden ruler to straighten over steam. She straightened it without breaking it. She was given the lid of a small chest, cracked at the hinge, and asked to hide the crack so that the hinge would hold. She thought about it, put the lid aside, took a thin leather patch and some soft glue made from fish bladders, and tucked the hinge so that the crack remained under the leather, and the hinge did not rub against the end. The manager nodded. He said she had a keen eye and gentle strength, and that these qualities were rare. The travelers looked at each other as if they had decided something long discussed. They said that the girl should be enrolled as an apprentice in the Street of Measurers, under the supervision of the guild, because a gift without a craft is wasted. The steward objected that the charter did not allow taking anyone without recommendations and a name. Then the middle traveler took an old leather folder out of his purse, carefully untied the strap, and placed a parchment on the table, on which was written that the guild had the right to take people as apprentices on the basis of special merits and a sign of loyalty to the House of Scales, if they had a sign of inheritance. He pointed to Mira's pendant. The steward silently glanced at the parchment, then at the pendant, then back at the parchment. He said that the rite was old, rarely used, but still valid. Here, for the first time, there was a quiet murmur of hidden kinship, which was not yet a word, but was already a step towards it. The middle traveler asked Mira to tell everything she knew about her mother. She said that her mother had served the master of weights for a long time, even before that street became richer. She said that her mother taught her to check the knots on the bags so that the flour would not spill, and taught her to look at the light through a thin bowl to see equality. She said that her mother was silent about her father, and only repeated that he was her man in the city, that he had left a mark, and that in time the mark would open the door. Mira turned the pendant in her fingers and said that perhaps this was the mark. The travelers exchanged glances. The middle traveler said quietly that he knew a woman who worked for the master of weights, and that he was younger and more foolish then, and that he was guilty toward her. He said he did not know she had a daughter. His face did not move, but his hands became quieter. At that moment, a man in gray approached the room, short, with a narrow chin and thin fingers. He was the town clerk, who was often called upon to check seals and signatures. He asked if he could be of assistance. The steward said that help might be needed. While the adults were talking, Mira examined the wall with the seals. She noticed that under the sign of the ear of corn there was a barely visible notch, as if a seal with a cracked rim had once been pressed against the wall. She thought that someone in the city was making fake seals, because such a mark did not appear on its own. This thought led to a subtle thread to a future in which a simple detour would end in danger. She was enrolled as a student for the trial. She was given a place on a bench by the window, a box with bone blanks, a set of needles, glue, fine sandpaper, polishing cloths, and tiny files. They explained to her that the test involved doing small, honest work so that her hand would get used to smoothness, her eye to symmetry, and her soul to order. Mira nodded. She said she would not disappoint them. In the evening, she returned to the gate and told the guard that she was being allowed to stay in the city. The guard said that was good for her. The following week, a merchant brought oil in a jug to the street. She said that the oil was for lamps and for dipping blades, that it was pure. Mira took the jug, sniffed it, and noticed that the oil smelled bitter, as if something foreign had been added to it. She felt the skin on her fingers tighten slightly from the coolness of the jug, and realized that the oil was too light for real lamp oil. She poured a drop into a saucer, looked at its slipperiness, and said that the oil had been adulterated. The merchant blushed and said that it had been sold to her that way. The steward said that deliveries had to be checked twice. Mira wrote in her notebook that the oil was suspicious. The clerk in gray noticed how she wrote without mistakes and said that she had a good mind. A few days later, a boy from the blacksmith's yard approached their door and handed Mira a package, saying that it was a delivery from a customer and that it had to be opened in front of the master. Mira took the package, touched it, felt dense round objects inside, and something like a narrow seal. She told the steward that it seemed to contain weights and a seal. The steward agreed to open it in front of witnesses. Inside were 4 small weights for grain and a copper seal with the same ear of corn and 3 lines. Mira noticed that the rim of the seal was slightly thinner than the real one on the wall, and that the pattern was slightly crooked on one ear of corn. She thought it was a fake. The clerk looked at it, nodded, and said that the crookedness could not be seen in dim light, and that this fake could pass in a lax warehouse. The administrator said that this smelled like trouble, because the fake seal could be used to seal bags that were underweight. He added that whoever was doing this was close to the guild, otherwise they would not have taken the seal. The travelers, who turned out to be guild elders, returned to this room on business and saw Mira holding a fake seal in her hands. They said that they had to act calmly. The eldest of them told them to pretend that everything was fine and asked the boy who had sent the package. The boy said that one of the scribe's assistants, a man in gray, had asked him to deliver it. Mira felt her fingers go cold. The scribe in gray, the one who was there every day, stood before them and suddenly said that he had not given such an order. He added that the scribe's name was easy to use because he often entrusted minor tasks to people from the street. Thus began their everyday thriller, where an ordinary bundle at the door turned into the key to a threat. The elders ordered them to be quiet and watch. Mira was instructed to continue her work, and the administrator was instructed to check all the seals on the wall. The scribe put an honest mark against his surname to dispel suspicion. At that moment, Mira understood for the first time how easily a clean street becomes narrow, how fear creeps along it, and how every breath is restrained. A day later, someone quietly placed a bag with 2 silver coins and a note next to her seat. The note said that if she kept quiet about the thin rim of the seal, she would be able to buy herself new clothes and move from the courtyard to the river. The note was unsigned, but there was a greasy fingerprint on the fold of the paper, as if from oil. Mira remembered the bitterness in the jug and decided that this was a clue to the same person. She took the note, put it in the box, and told the elders that she would pretend to agree in order to lure out the sender. They allowed her to do so, but told her to be careful. Mira went to the market and left a reply note on the oil merchant's counter, saying that she agreed to keep quiet, but she needed to know where to bring her silence. The merchant was frightened and told her that she was only a middleman, that she had been asked to pass on the message. She said that the request came from a short man in gray who often visits the clerks and weighers. She added that he had thin fingers. Mira nodded. She realized that the circle was narrowing. She did not blame the clerk because she knew that there was more than one such person. But the note about thin fingers stuck in her mind. The elders insisted on a secret meeting. They came to the street of the measurers at night without cloaks, so that their insignia would not shine. They said that theft of measures was worse than simple theft because it poisoned the trust of many at once. They decided to conduct a hunt. Mira was told to distract them. She was sent to the other end of the street with instructions to check the weights. At this time, the elders, along with the steward and the blacksmith, waited outside the workshop. They wanted to catch the person who would come for the bribe. At dawn, a man in a gray cloak cautiously approached the door. He looked around, took out a seal with a thin rim, and wanted to apply it to a bag of grain lying in the corner to see if he could use it unnoticed. He failed. They surrounded him. He began to say that he was only following someone else's orders, that he was not in charge. He said that the person behind the seals was someone who knew the guild's statutes better than ordinary servants. When he was taken aside, the clerk they knew came in. He looked at the detainee and said that he was a distant relative on his mother's side, that he carried documents and messages, and that he was often asked to carry bundles and seals because he was inconspicuous. The clerk said that it was his fault that he had not noticed how dishonesty had crept into his family line. He said he was ready to answer for it. The elders accepted the confession, but said that the main thing was still missing. At that moment, the middle elder suddenly said that in previous years, one master of weights had made seals with a slightly thinner rim to save metal, and that he had been asked to stop. He said that the master had disobeyed. He added that this master was a hot-tempered, ambitious man, and that he had a maid who had left him in disgrace because he had accused her of theft. Mira realized that they were talking about her mother. The air became heavier. The sergeant asked to see the books from previous years. The clerk brought them. They leafed through them until they found an entry, a master of weights who had been dismissed for cheating with a rim. Next to it was a symbol, 3 lines and an ear of corn, the same symbol as on Mira's pendant. Mira asked if this meant that the master could have been her father, because her mother wore this symbol and she had the same lines on her pendant. The middle sergeant said it was possible. He added that this explained why the pendant had opened the door to the old inheritance rights for her. He said that the right thing was not for her father to be a good man, but for her to be honest and accurate herself. She nodded. Her fingers trembled, but her voice was steady. While they were sorting out kinship, clues, and seals, word spread around town that the street of the measurers was busy with its work. This brought all sorts of people there. Among them was someone everyone underestimated, a skinny former driver who now worked as a cleaner at the gate, sweeping dust and taking out the trash. His name was Ale. He was always silent. and people laughed at his stooped posture and slowness. Mira did not laugh. She sometimes gave him bread. On the day they were catching the man with gray fingers, Ale noticed a thin rope at the back wall that stretched to the neighboring barn. He followed it with his eyes and saw that the rope was tied to the bars of a small window, and if you pulled it, the bars would come off and you could get into the workshop from the other side. Ale realized that someone had been preparing an escape route. He went to the overseer and told him he had seen the rope. He rarely spoke, so his words were taken seriously. The elders followed him and found the secret passage. They hid nearby and saw another man in gray approach the grate a few minutes later. He pulled on the rope and tried to climb through, but was caught. Under his gray cloak, they found seals with other symbols, not only of the ear of corn, but also of the shoemakers and tanners guilds. The captured man said that he had been ordered to do so by a man from inside the street, one who had access to all the doors. He said it was the steward. The words hit like a stone, but did not cloud their judgment. The elders looked at the steward. He turned pale, but said it was a lie. He added that the man in gray wanted to save himself by shifting the blame to someone who stood by the law. He said that his hands were clean and that he had all his keys with him. Then Ale asked to see the keys and the hinges on the back gate. He crouched down, sniffed the metal, ran his finger along the edge, and said that the hinges were greased with the same bitter oil that Mira had noticed at the merchant's. He said that the steward had no oil in his key box. It smelled of glue and bone. He added that the smell of bitter oil came from the one caught in gray. The people fell silent. This silent cleaner showed that he could see more than others. He had been underestimated, but now he became the hero of the moment. It was the turn of an underestimated hero, prepared by small details, his slowness, his habit of sweeping and noticing small things, his rare speech, which people listened to. The clerk in gray said that now it was clear that it was not those closest to the guild who were to blame, but those hiding behind them. He said that they should look for someone who was skilled at fine cutting and bone work. Then their gaze fell on one of the master craftsman's assistants, a man who often polished bone and liked to say that metal was too expensive and bone was easier to work with. His name was Tari. Mira remembered that he once praised the thin rims of the seals and laughed that no one would notice if they were made a little smaller. The elders ordered him to be brought in. He was brought in. He said he didn't understand what was going on. He was confident. Then Mira placed two seals in front of him, the real one and the fake one. She said that he liked smooth rims and asked if he could see the difference. He replied that there was no difference. This was important because the person who makes thin rims sees the difference more often than anyone else. He gave himself away. They showed him traces of bitter oil on his sleeves. He said it was from the lamp. Then they showed him the remains of bone on his fingernails. He said it was from work. Then Ale took a piece of wood with a carved ear of corn, but with a curve on one grain, out of a pile of rubbish. He said he had found it recently in the rubbish by the back wall. Tari turned pale. He realized that the chain had closed around him. The elders made their decision. Tari was to be handed over to the city court. All seals were to be checked, and the market traders were to be informed that the street measure was under protection. They added that it was impossible to live without an honest measure. Mira stood aside and thought about her mother. She thought that if her father was that displaced master, then his cunning had now come back around and almost hit her on the head. It was a hidden kinship that carried not only the privilege of the door, but also the responsibility to keep the measure straight so that someone else's cunning would not stain you. She accepted this calmly. After the trial, the elders gathered and discussed what to do with Mira. The eldest said that her hands should be taught, her eyes should be guarded, and her honesty should be encouraged. He suggested giving her a personal recommendation and a place by the window with the right to stamp her own mark on bone buttons and small measuring spoons. The middle one said that this was not enough. He said that she should be given access to his workshop. He added that he had no children and that his business had to be passed on to someone, otherwise it would die. He said that he saw in Mira a hand that could be trusted for accuracy. He was told that this was too quick and too confusing for the town. He said that everything could be explained. He guessed that Mira was the daughter of the woman he had once failed to protect, and that he wanted to make amends for an old debt. He said that he could not bring back the past, but he could give the future a solid foundation. He said that it would be fair to the guild as well, because they would not lose a master, but gain one. It was a twist of hidden kinship that received moral relief. The old man's guilt became the reason for the honest gift of craftsmanship, rather than secret compliance with the law. The administrator said that the city might be outraged because a girl without a family was suddenly rising. Then, it was decided to test her at a general guild council meeting. She was given the task of making a set of 12 bone buttons of the same weight, shape, and smoothness in one day, with 4 holes in each, pairs of the same name for 16 palms of fabric, and 2 small spoons for measuring salt, so that they would show the same volume at different water temperatures. It was a difficult task because bone behaves differently in cold and warm temperatures, and the spoons had to be made with adjustments. Mira took on the task. She asked for clean bone, good skin, a smooth awl, and a precise sand cut. She cut the blanks evenly and left them loose for a while. She hung 2 spoon blanks over steam and over cold to see how the bend changed. She noted that in the cool, the bone retained its shape, and in the warm, it softened. She decided to make the spoons with a slightly shallower curve so that they would expand to the desired volume in the warm. She sanded the inside and tested them in water. She made 2 mistakes, guessed right the 3rd time, and got it right the 4th time. The elders watched silently. They saw that it was not luck, but reason and experience, albeit brief. She finished by sunset. She laid out 12 buttons in a row, and they were all the same. She wiped the spoons, placed them next to the measuring cup, and showed that the volume was the same. The elders said that was enough. The senior added that she had a steady hand and a good eye, and that this was rare. He said that a workshop in the city was a responsibility and hard work. He said that if she was ready, she could join. At that moment, another turn of events occurred that no one would have noticed if not for the earlier details. An oil merchant was standing at the workshop door. She held her shawl tightly and said that she had been afraid the whole time. She said that the man in gray had threatened her if she didn't deliver the notes. She added that now she wanted to make amends. She brought an old seal that someone had used to seal other people's bags. The seal had a blurred mark, like a shoemaker's, but with a curve on one sole. The elders said that this mark was used at the other end of the market. They realized that the network was wider than they had thought. The merchant asked for protection. The elders promised that they would not take her to court if she helped identify those who brought the seals. Thus ended the domestic thriller. A simple jug of oil and a bundle of cloth became the thread that was pulled, revealing the entire network. The next day, there was a guild meeting. People came, talked among themselves. Some frowned skeptically, some nodded. Buttons and spoons were placed on the table. The elders explained the situation. They talked about the counterfeits, the danger, the catch, and the underappreciated cleaner Ale, who had noticed the rope and the smell of oil. They called him by name and said that he deserved a reward and a place on the street, so that he could clean not on the outskirts of the city, but in the very heart of measures and seals. They said that without such eyes, the street would go blind. Ale did not smile, but his eyes sparkled. Then the elders spoke about Mira. They said that in their narrow profession, it was not lineage that was valued, but skill and character. They added that there was an old law according to which a person who bore the mark of the house and had shown loyalty could be accepted under a special clause. They opened the parchment and read the lines. They said that the girl had passed the test. They said that she was the daughter of the woman who had served the House of Scales, and that one of the elders had a personal debt to that memory. They said that this debt was to be paid in the form of teaching and passing on knowledge, not blind affection. They asked whether she should be given a workshop. The guild court decided to give Mira a workshop by the window on the street of the measurers, to give her the right to put her personal mark on small items, and to entrust her with working with bone buttons, spoons, seals for grain bags, and, in time, small metal parts. She was required to keep apprentices to train. She was given a board with her name on it and a tiny copper hammer to attract attention when someone came to her table with a question. It was an unexpected turn of events, and it had been prepared in advance by everything she had done: water at the gate, bread, clean mugs, a steady hand, and refusal to take bribes. She moved from the courtyard to the street of the measurers. She had a narrow room above the workshop, a low bed, a clay bowl, a shelf with a notebook and a bone comb, and a small chest where her only belongings lay: her mother's old shawl, a pendant on a string, and a new hammer. Every day she went down to the street and opened the shutters. She greeted Ale, who now swept not at the gate, but on their street. He collected bone fragments, scraps of paper, and sometimes brought her interesting fragments so that she could learn to understand what kind of thing it was from a piece. He once said that discarded trifles reveal more about a person's habits than loud words. She learned this rule and often kept it in mind. There was a lot of work. She made buttons for tailors, measuring spoons for salt merchants, seals for grain sacks, and small inserts for cash registers to keep them running smoothly. She rarely spoke. She listened. People said she had a light touch, an attentive ear, and that she did not like injustice. Sometimes rich people came to her. They looked at her simple clothes and thought there was nothing interesting here, but they took her things and came back because the thread didn't snag and the spoon measured honestly. Her workshop became a small island of fairness in a city where connections often decided everything. One day, an assistant from the Shoemakers Guild appeared at the doorstep with a request to make 10 seals with the new shoemaker's mark. He brought a drawing of the mark, a sole without curvature, a straight seam line, and a dot at the heel. Mira took on the job. She made the first seal and took it for inspection. On her way back, she saw a crowd of people gathered at the shoemaker's shop. They were arguing about the price, and the argument was heated. She stopped and heard one man shouting that he had been cheated because the shoemaker's measuring block was incorrect. She did not intervene because she did not like loud arguments in the street, but she noticed that the shoemaker had an old plate with a seal on the wall, on which the ear of corn was crooked. This detail alarmed her. The argument died down. She returned to her place, signed the seals, put her mark on them, and handed them over. She told herself that the city would not change in a day, but that every day she could do her part to keep things honest. A boy from the quarries came to her with a request to make a strong bone screwdriver with a flat tip to press down the small metal rims on measuring cups. She said that the bone would break, but if it was treated properly and soaked in oil, it would hold up. Inside her lived the memory of that bitter oil. She could now distinguish honest oil from impurities by its smell. She suggested making a mixture of good oil and heated salt to make the bone denser. The boy agreed. She made it, and the tool turned out to be strong. One day at dawn, the middle sergeant came to her door. He was tired, but his eyes were bright. He said that today they had a difficult meeting ahead of them. The guilds were arguing about the new inspection procedure. He said that someone was turning the shoemakers against the weighers, and that this was not good. He asked Mira to come and bring the spoons she had made on the first day as a sign of a fair start, to remind people that they should stick to what they had started with. She agreed. They entered the large hall of the guild. It was noisy there. People were talking over each other. Savka from the Leatherworkers Guild shouted that the weighers were meddling in their business, that the inspections were costing them time and money. Someone replied that without checks, the leather would be underweight. The middle-ranking officer raised his hand. He spoke calmly. He said that they had uncovered a network of counterfeiting, and that now they needed to strengthen the system in a sensible way. He suggested that each month, different guilds should check each other crosswise, rather than just the weighers checking everyone else. He said that this would instill discipline and remove accusations of bias. He said that if today the shoemaker checks the weigher, tomorrow the weigher will check the shoemaker, and so everyone will be honest. Mira put her spoons on the table. She said that volumes change in heat and cold, and that everyone knows this, but not everyone takes it into account. She suggested writing this directly into the charter. Measure salt with a warm spoon, flour with a dry spoon, and oil with a wet spoon. She said that this was not a matter of dispute, but a necessity. Otherwise, the scandals would start again. People fell silent and began to listen. They saw that this young craftswoman was speaking to the point and without pride. It was a reversal of hidden talent against status. A simple person without a family name proposed a simple but accurate rule that had not occurred to the elders, who were busy fighting for influence. This was prepared by her previous deeds, her ability to see details and express them in simple words. After a short pause, the charter was changed. It was her small victory. A week later, an unfamiliar woman came to her. She was poorly dressed but clean. She said that the hay collector at the city gate was in danger because someone was replacing the seals on the hay bags, causing the caravanners to quarrel with the city guards. She said that her husband worked at the gate and that their family feared punishment. She asked Mira to look at the seal. Mira looked and saw a familiar curve in the pattern. She said it was an old trace of a net that they had already torn, but apparently some remnants remained. She said they would help, but they would not drown in pity. They would do what they could. She went to the elders. They decided to go through the market, the streets, and the warehouses again. They took Ali with them because he had an eye for small signs, greasy marks, new ropes, inappropriate lines on the stone. They walked for 3 days. On the third day, Ali noticed fresh bone shavings near the stairs. They smelled of dampness. He said that they were not from buttons, but from fillings, because the shavings were wider. They entered the house next door. There sat an old man who used to sell needles and hooks. He was trembling and said he had been forced to do it. He said that a man of medium height in a gray cloak had come, left the bone, and left, and then came back for the fillings and paid. He said he was afraid to refuse because he had no relatives. He said that he used to work honestly, but then he lost sight in one eye. He said that the man in gray said that all the rich people in town were dishonest anyway, so why shouldn't he live? The elders put the old man in a corner, gave him water and a piece of bread. They said they wouldn't touch him if he helped them find the gray man. The old man said that the man came at night. Then Mira suggested making a decoy, hanging a picture of a seal on the door, but adding a small notch that the forger would find convenient to cut out because it would indicate an easy spot. It was a trick of the honest hand. The elders agreed. At night, the man in gray came. He stopped, saw the notch, and a smile ran across his lips like light on water. He reached for the drawing, ran his finger over it, and made a small mark on the door to remember the proportions. At that moment, he was caught. He was not the one they had caught before, but he was from the same network. They found stamps and money on him. He named another, higher up. So they pulled the chain until they came to a man from the city council who kept the accounts. He sat high, so it was difficult to touch him. But they had evidence: seals, money, notches, witnesses. They referred the case to the court. The court was strict. It was read aloud all day. It handed down its verdict: punishment for the guilty, acquittal for the innocent. The city breathed a sigh of relief. People said that now things would get better. The elders said that the proud heads had been bowed. After that, the city became calmer. The street of measurers kept order. The shoemakers agreed to cross-checks, and the merchants stopped arguing over every cup. Mira worked and taught. Girls from the outskirts came to her, girls who had not been accepted before because they had no recommendations. She remembered herself at the gate, so she took two. One quiet, her name was Jana; the other quick, her name was Branka. She told them that their hands must be precise and their words simple. She taught them to hold the needle straight, wash the tools, and not laugh at those who were slow. She often told them that a smile without work is empty, and work without a smile is hard, so you have to find a middle ground. She did not forget the guards at the gate. She sometimes brought them a mug of water and bread, as she once brought to travelers. She remembered that hot noon when her journey began. She knew that chance was only a pretext, and everything else was her choice. She knew that the road might not have opened if she had taken other people's coins and kept silent. She knew that every turn in her life had been anticipated by what she had done before. The pendant with the blades, the clean mugs, the canceled bribe, her attention to smell. She understood now that this was justice, when the reward flows from actions rather than falling from above for no reason. A year later, the elders gathered again. They said it was time to grant Mira an official workshop under the guild's seal, not just as an apprentice, but as an independent master. They said her mark would be a bone spoon on top of an ear of corn. They said she was now responsible for the rules section, so that no one would forget about heat and cold. She accepted. She said she was ready. Her fingers did not tremble. That same year, an event occurred that put an end to her hidden kinship. A letter from the old master of weights, written with a trembling hand many years ago, was found in the archives. In the letter, he admitted that he had a servant who left while pregnant, and that he had left her a small pendant with keys that could open the door to the house of the myrrh. He wrote that he regretted his anger and greed. The letter lay in the trunk of the middle sergeant, who had found it before, but had not opened it, because he was afraid to see his young guilt. Now he opened it, read it aloud, and placed the sheet in front of Mira. He said he was guilty. He said he had been a coward. He said he wanted her to keep the letter. She took it without folding it. She said that a person becomes a person when they see their guilt and take the right step. She did not hug him or cry. She just stood next to him. It was their social truth. No shouting, no sweetness, just clear responsibility. The city accepted her workshop. People began to say that the shop window on Meriltsikov Street had changed. It now displayed not only iron weights, but also bone spoons, fillings with smooth rims, and buttons that did not tear threads. There were rumors that this house did not take extra money and did not haggle over prices. It was true. She set a fair price and explained what she was charging for. People who were richer stopped despising her for her poverty and began to respect her for her accuracy. People who were poor knew that they could come and ask her to mend a button in exchange for bread. She gave it to them because she remembered herself at the gate. Ale, an underappreciated hero, got a new life. He was given the job of street cleaner. He was quietly proud of this. He still spoke rarely, but when he did, people listened. He became the eyes of the street. He joked in his own way. If he saw a new rope where it shouldn't be, he would say that there was extra grass growing there, and everyone understood that they had to go and look. He and Mira didn't need loud words. They did their job. Jana and Branka became not just students, but apprentices. Jana had a good eye for symmetry, and Branka kept the rhythm. Together with Mira, they came up with a little trick: to put a mark on the fillings that was barely visible to the naked eye, so that anyone who tried to forge them would not be able to repeat it, because the mark changed every month. It wasn't a secret, it was a rule. They wrote it down with the clerk, who put it in storage. Thus, simple hidden talent defeated the status of lazy people who were used to relying only on their name. Mira did not seek a crown. She lived for her work. She sometimes went to the river and remembered how she poured water for travelers on a hot noon. She knew that then she was noticed not for her beauty, but for her honesty and accuracy. She believed that if someone else in the city stood at the gate and poured water, they would also be noticed. She told her students that goodness is not a soft fabric, but a working thing. Pouring water, serving bread, putting away a crooked seal, telling the truth, even if you are afraid. She said that the reward for goodness is not praise, but the right to do more and be more responsible. One day, the city became restless again. The price of grain rose due to a poor harvest. People were nervous. They argued in queues. They looked for someone to blame. Mira stuck to her guns. She did not allow anyone to take the seal away without reason. She said that in difficult years, it is especially important to keep the measure honest. Otherwise, the trouble will double. A man from the local government came to her, a new one, and said that in a difficult year, traders should be given more freedom. She replied that freedom without measure is deception. He said she had a sharp tongue. She said she had an even tongue and an even hand. He left. He returned a month later, when the people began to riot. He asked her to help calm the market. She agreed on the condition that he sign an order to distribute salt and flour fairly, using spoons and bowls rather than shouting. He signed. The market calmed down. It was another victory of hidden talent over status. More time passed. Miran's house was filled with things, but it was not luxurious. Her room remained simple. A pendant with carvings hung on the wall. Next to it hung a parchment with a letter from the old master. On the shelf stood a wooden figure of scales, which Ale had carved and brought on the day she received her mark. The figure was simple but smooth. It was his gift, which was worth more than gold. One autumn day, when the leaves were falling on the pavement, a girl with a clay jug came to the gate. Mira happened to be at the gate on business, and saw the girl pouring water for 2 travelers. She gave them bread and salt. She held the jug steady. Mira approached and asked the girl to show her the mugs. The mugs were clean. She smiled and said that the journey must continue. She thought that the circle had ended and a new one had begun. She knew that good deeds had been done, and that deeds lead to rewards, which consist not of coins, but of the opportunity to be needed. So the story of the orphan who gave drink to strangers at the gate led her to the street of the measurers, gave her a workshop in the city and responsibility for honest measurement. The twists and turns were no miracle. A hidden kinship was revealed through a sign. An unexpected benefactor acted because he saw in her something that coincided with the needs of the guild and his own guilt. Hidden talent proved stronger than status, and an underestimated person became the one who found the main thread. An everyday bundle at the door turned their daily routine into a short thriller that ended in the courtroom. The ending was clear, not because of chance, but because of choice, refusal of a bribe, honest work, attention to detail, willingness to admit guilt and shut down the network. The city received fair spoons, strong fillings, and confident people. Mira received a workshop and a debt that she bore not heavily, but evenly, because she knew the price of water, bread, and honest measure. Goodness became a reward, and the reward became a deed for which she was not ashamed to look people in the eye.